Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. You know, something that I typically don't do during the introductions, I probably should, is let you all know about something that I cooked up for people that want to get some help in their public speaking. It's a sheet of tips that I think could be really helpful for you. So if you are interested in getting that, you can go to teachthegeek.com/tips. Again, that's teachthegeek.com/tips. All right, now let's get back to the regular scheduled program. Today, my guest is a return guest. His name is David Giltner. He's the founder of TurningScience, helping scientists and engineers build careers in industry. He's also the author of the new book, It's a Game, Not a Formula: How to Succeed as a Scientist Working in the Private Sector. I'm really interested to learn more about the book and what academics who are thinking about making the jump out of academia can do to make that happen. Welcome back to Teach the Geek interviews, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to be back.
So, you know, I just mentioned that you wrote this book. What was the motivation for writing it?
Well, excellent question. The motivation for writing it was that my first book, Turning Science into Things People Need, I wrote at the very beginning of this whole thing, and I really just interviewed a bunch of scientists to get their stories, and that was great and valuable. But at the time, I didn't have any of my own thoughts. That's the thing that started me down this path, and after, about 10 years of speaking and meeting with scientists and really thinking about this, I had developed a lot of my own ideas, and I had kind of thought, boy, it'd be good to write another book where I put some of my ideas into this. That was the motivation, and then the initiation, I guess, was frankly the COVID pandemic, because I normally travel a lot. I was in Berlin, Germany, when the travel ban in the U.S. was implemented, and I had to grab the last flight home. And in the week or two after that, I'm sitting at home thinking, well, I had to cancel all my plans, my workshops and things for the next couple of months. What am I going to do? And it seemed like the right time to write the book. So that's how that all came together. And so it finally gave me a chance to put all these ideas I had been working on in my head into the book.
So I'm assuming that even from your work in Turning Science and in putting this book together, you were one of those people that was in academia, you made the jump to industry. When did you realize that jump was one that you were going to make?
So as a graduate student, I went into industry right after my PhD, so I did it pretty early, but that's absolutely enough time in academia that, it was a challenge. I think that it's different at the PhD level than, say, if you get a bachelor's and go right out into the private sector. When you do that, everyone knows you're green. You've learned skills in university, but you're pretty green, and everyone knows that you're going to learn how it all works. But when you stay in university and get a PhD, you've spent a lot of time in the lab. You've been trained to be independent. You really emerge thinking, okay, I know how this is done, but that's for an academic setting. And then if you decide to go into the private sector then, or certainly later, the more time you spend, the more that difference in the rules or the way it's done, the habits that bring success are the transition. That's really the jump. And so I realized at the last year of my PhD work, after I'd imagined I'd be a professor, mostly just because that's what you do as a scientist. That's the traditional career path, it seems, even though most of us don't actually do that, but it feels like the traditional path. And in my last year, I had watched the other professors and my advisor during my graduate studies and thought, I don't think that's actually the career I want after all. I want something a little more dynamic, a little more, the ability to change. The idea of, getting tenure and keeping the same job for the rest of my life actually no longer sounded appealing. And, I wanted more change.
Were you at all apprehensive about making that jump? And if so, how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, I certainly wondered if it was the right thing to do. I wondered that a lot. I just knew that staying in academia wasn't going to fit, and so I was willing to take that chance. But I had no idea what lay ahead for me. That was really it. Somehow we sort of know, okay, there are jobs, there are companies that do things. We have that idea of it, but we don't really have any idea what the job is actually going to be like. And I was definitely nervous, concerned, worried, as many of us are. Am I going to regret leaving academia? I'm going from something I know very well, even if I've decided that's not for me, to something I don't know at all. And that's a big jump.
What did your professor think about you leaving academia?
She was supportive. I don't think she understood it. She was very much an academic. We did very basic science, not applied at all, fundamental, new physics, precision measurements, things like that. And so I think she was a little disappointed because I think she'd imagined that I would follow in her footsteps. She was certainly supportive, but, I remember the conversation. She said, if you want a postdoc, if you want an academic career, I can help. I've got connections. I'm happy to hook you up with a great postdoc. And I knew she could help. But she said, but if you want to go in the private sector, you're pretty much on your own. I don't know anything about it. I don't know anyone there. It's an unknown to me. And unfortunately, you are on your own. I'd love to help you. So she was as supportive as she could be, but she couldn't really help. And I don't think she really fully understood it. I think to her, it was really a different career path that was, why would somebody do this is probably a little bit what she was thinking.
Wow. And, it's so interesting that there are people that would even have that thought. Why would somebody do this? But isn't the answer that there's not enough jobs that could support all the people who would even want to stay in academia? Although maybe that's not the case in your field. Are there enough jobs to support all the people who want to stay in academia?
There are not. So it's correct to say that's the reason, that's the numerical reason anyway. I mean, there are absolutely not enough jobs. And the statistics vary. I mean, the number of jobs are very small, and the statistics on how many scientists actually, PhD scientists actually stay in academia are vary depending on the study, because it's hard to track people well into their careers. But it's actually a very small fraction that end up becoming full professors because of the number of jobs. I like to focus it a bit more on, it's if you only focus on the numbers, then it feels like, well, hey, we'd all like to have academic careers. It's just we can't, and so we have to shift. And that's really not true, and that's not the position that I like to put forth, because that makes it sound like a private sector career might not be the most desirable for some people, and it is for many. An academic career is awesome for the people that really want to do it. But a lot of us, like me, actually decided, even if there were enough jobs, that career path isn't what I thought would excite me and be a rewarding career. So in addition to the numbers you mentioned, which are absolutely true, there's no way we could all get jobs in academia. Many of us realized that we'd like to go out and actually make things that help people. The time frame is a lot faster. Rather than publishing papers that hopefully get used in 5, 10, 20 years, depending on the field you're working in, we make things that people will actually use in 6 months, 9 months, a couple of years.
Yeah. I can see how some people would value that over did my paper get published in the most premier journal that I could in that particular field. What would you say to somebody who has the idea of, maybe I go into industry, but maybe I go back to academia, kind of toggle back between the two of them? What kind of roadblocks what do you think they'll face?
Well, so yeah, the challenge that they face is that classically an academic career is built on growing a research program, right? And so you study something as a PhD, and then you go into more depth as a postdoc. And what universities are typically looking for is, have you shown you can build a research program? Because that's what brings the most value to the university. And so if you go to industry, that breaks that. You're almost certainly not going to be continuing that research. And then when you come back, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but that's the barrier that you will face. And that is certainly not the traditional path.
Yeah. So, I was really curious about the title of the book, especially the part, it's a game, not a formula. So what makes it a game and not a formula?
That's a great question. So I love that title. That comes from something that I found myself thinking and reminding myself and reminding other people over and over. It comes from, we scientists and engineers, technical people, we are so used to looking for the right answer. right? That's what science is about. We're looking for a formula or a theory to explain how the universe works or some aspect of the universe, right? And that thinking really permeates so much of what we do. You know, we are relatively intelligent. We learn skills, the scientific method. We can figure out the right answer. We tend to approach our lives and careers that way too, looking for the right answer. And what I have certainly found in the private sector, especially as I moved from less technical or into less technical jobs where, you know, more customer interface, more business oriented as is very common, you really learn that it's not about the right answer. There is no right answer much of the time. And this formula approach doesn't work. It's more like a game. And when that clicked in my head, hey, this is a game, I thought this is a good way to remind myself, oh yeah, stop looking for the right answer, get out there and play the game. And if I were to say, well, okay, what makes it like a game? First, like I mentioned, there's no single right answer. Just like in a game, there are several ways to win. That's how you get competition, right? That's, if there were one way to win, you know, that's more like a puzzle that everyone can solve the puzzle. But in a game, there are many ways to win. I like to say, I'm not a big professional sports fan, but it makes an excellent example. Think of your favorite professional sport. Could be anything. And then think of maybe your favorite 3 teams in that sport. Do the coaches or the managers coach their teams in the exact same way? Well, no, they all have their own styles, their own strategies, their own methods, even though they're playing on the same field and the same rules. Why? Well, there's many ways to win, and depending on their experience and the skill, the team members and all of that, they have to put together their own way. And it's the same in your career. There's no right way. Look at your strengths, your experience, your interests, and find a way to win. The other is that, or another way is it's a game, is you have to take risks. You know, the whole idea of finding the right answer is, a formula is the kind of thing where if you have the components of the formula, the elements of the formula, you get the answer. You get, you know, that's the whole idea. You plug in the right things, you get the answer. But your career and frankly your life doesn't really work that way. You have to take risks, you have to do things, and you don't really know what the outcome's going to be. Just like a game, you have to take the shot and you might miss. You have to play your hand, and cards you might lose. You have to move your chess piece. And so you have to take risks. And then the last thing is, knowledge isn't enough. We get used to, you know, we're intelligent, we understand a lot of things, and that's power, and knowledge is power. But winning the game in business and life and private sector is really not just about knowledge. I like to say, knowing the rules better than everyone is not how you get to be a great player. That's how you become a referee. And so, do you want to be a ref or do you want to score points? Many times the best players, they know the rules, but they actually figure out how to work around those constraints, right? And that is success. And so knowledge is fine, but, you know, we all know somebody who knows a lot of things, but they can't necessarily get stuff done. Well, that's because they're not playing the game. They're looking for the formula approach. And so anyway, that is where that came from. And I decided that's got to be the title of the book because it's such a powerful thing. We need to stop looking for the right answer and get in there and play the game. Take some risks, take a shot.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And, you know, when you were talking about there not being a right answer, it kind of reminded me of being an engineer, being in medical devices and proposing a project and the project not working out. It'd be interesting if you were to go back to the supervisor and they're all mad because things didn't work out. Be like, hey, there wasn't the right answer.
Yeah,
I picked an answer and it didn't work out, man. What do you want from me?
Well, and that could be an interesting thing for scientists and engineers, because in the lab, even if it's a technical product or a technical project, it feels like, well, somewhere there ought to be a right answer because it's just physics or chemistry or biology or something. But when you're turning it into a product, there are so many unpredictable things that get folded into it, right? That I think the right approach is to think that there is no right answer. We tend to think, but maybe if I had enough data, even an infinite amount of data, I would know. And so that pushes us to keep looking. That becomes a procrastination tool. That's why one of the complaints that experienced managers in technical companies have about, especially the PhD scientists, we are the worst, is we struggle to decide because we keep thinking that if we had enough data, the right answer would pop out to us. And that is just usually fundamentally not true. There's the technical part, perhaps, maybe in the physics of it or the chemistry of it, there's a right answer. But when you take that into a product, it's best to figure there's no right answer. Look for what's a good answer and then work to make that work, push that forward. That's the way you play the game.
Yeah, I mean, that might work in academia, but when you're in industry, time's money. We gotta put something out at some point. So you can ruminate all you want, but no, you're not ruminating on our dime.
Absolutely. No, that is exactly right. If you're trying to publish a paper, you're looking for the right answer and you keep studying it until that theory, you've got it nailed down and that's it. But in the private sector, you're just looking for something that works. Not perfect, right? It's got to meet a spec. It's got to serve a certain purpose. And like you said, we need to get it out there. We don't have 3 years to study this. We might only have 6 months. So we have to pick a good solution, work to test it and make sure it's actually good. And get that out there quickly. That's the game.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just give the hypothetical that you're an academic, you want to make the jump to academia. What do you think should be the first step you take?
So I think the first step is really understanding the different environment. There's a lot of talk in career development about transferable skills, and it's good to understand that. But if you have a technical degree, you probably have plenty of skills. It's good to understand that. The biggest barrier, though, that I see to success in making that jump is actually thinking about the working habits, the thinking habits. That doesn't get as much attention. I mean, that's the big reason I wrote this book, because I hadn't seen that out there. It's, you have the technical skills. That's not the problem. When people say, well, what other classes should I take or other certifications? That's not really the issue. You need to understand that it's a different environment. It's profit driven rather than knowledge driven. And that means that's what makes it this game where you have to take a risk. You have to make decisions when you don't have the right answer. You have to learn to persuade people, because you can't prove it. If there's no right answer, you can't use proof the way you might in your scientific paper, Yeah. And then I like to say you have to learn to be effective, not just smart, right? In a university, in a school environment, being smart gets the point. That's how you get the A or the top grade. But in the private sector, you have to think about being effective. And sometimes that means saying, hey, I don't know, I need to go get help from somebody. Or, oh, I was wrong, I need to admit that right away so we know the right way going forward. That's how you be effective, and that's how you get those fast results. So really, focus on, understand what is that environment like. Talking to people in the private sector is good. And of course, there's my book, which is why I wrote it. I think that's a good primer to plug that. That's, understand what it's like, and you'll do better in understanding what kind of job you might be able to do. You'll do better interviewing for that job, because you're less likely to talk like that. What they think of as the stereotypical academic PhD that's interested in spending years working on learning something new. Can you play the game to get fast results? That's what you want to convince them of.
Yeah, I mean, and the sooner you learn that, the better, because you don't want to be that PhD that came from academia to industry thinking you have all this time. You don't have all this time. You may want to move up within an organization. You got to figure out the best way to do that too. And it's not going to be because I came up with the best technical solution, or because I wrote out this technical brief that was just so brilliant. Like most of the people that are non-technical but probably can't even understand it anyway. I mean, basically the proof's in the pudding. Were we able to put out something that people are willing to pay for based on your efforts? And if so, then that's basically what we're concerned with. Anything else than that, then maybe you should stay in academia. If you still wanted to put out, publish papers in these Tony journals, this ain't the place for you to be. We need you to be building stuff. And you're, as I said, your efforts have to go towards building something that people are willing to buy. If not, then you're kind of a drain. You're a drain on the company.
That's exactly right. I mean, you were absolutely right. And we need to understand that. That's a big part of making that transition. Something that I hear frequently is, and again, it's kind of the PhD scientist that gets this the worst, is they get this sense that, oh, I feel like I'm overqualified, or I've even been told I'm overqualified, or I'm too smart, or things like this by, people in the private sector. Those are usually euphemisms for, you seem like the stereotypical PhD, like you just described, Neil, that, just wants to spend years studying a problem and writing papers. And they don't, the way it seems to them is, okay, you are better for, discovering new things and working in an academic setting, but not in this practical area. And it comes out as overqualified and too smart. But what they really mean, and I think don't really have the language to say, because they haven't been in the academic setting, they don't really understand where the PhD is coming from. They say it's overqualified, or they say they're too smart, rather than you don't really understand the game.
I think you're absolutely right about that. It's so unfortunate that they don't just tell them the truth, because they're walking around thinking, oh, geez, I can't get these jobs. I'm overqualified. These companies don't understand me. It's like, nah, man, what you're bringing isn't what they need.
Right.
Or at least you need to position it into something that they can use. You, as he said, I want to write papers. I want to appear at conferences and give conference talks. That's what academics do, man. We need you building stuff. We need you, bringing value that we see as value, not what you necessarily see as value. And again, if that's not something you can get down with, then hey, man, it looks like you got to go do the postdoc.
Yeah, that's right. That's the postdocs where you can do that. Now you're exactly right. You've got the skills. You got to bring the right attitude and be ready to work on the right stuff. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Absolutely. So, when I typically do these interviews, I'm talking about people's public speaking journeys. And one of the questions I typically ask is if the person has a process that they use to put their presentations together. So I guess a similar question for you would be, if you want to make that jump from academia to industry, is there a process that you should use? And if so, what do you think it should be?
Yeah. So now, to be clear, are you asking about a speaking process, or just a process for making the jump?
Process for making the jump.
Okay, yeah. So I give a workshop on designing your own career path into the private sector. And it is exactly that. It is a system for how do you make this jump? Because we know there's a career path to become a professor. We know what that is, and many people have done it. But in the private sector, where do we start? And I like to say it starts with understanding what your strengths are. What can you do well, and what can you not do well? Coming out of an academic environment where we've had to basically show the same strengths as everyone else. We had to take all the same tests as everyone else. As you move into the private sector, that's not the case. You can take the tests that you're good at, right? You can design a career path that fits your strengths. So start with that. Second step, have a target. And this is one of the most important ones. So many, again, PhD scientists, I think, tend to be the worst at this. They kind of say, there's a lot I could do. I'm open to lots of jobs. But in doing that, they can't really focus in on anything. It's kind of like fishing. So they dangle a CV out there and hope the right job comes along. It sounds good because, hey, I'm open to everything. There's a numbers game. I'm open to lots of things. But then they can't really action that. When you have a target, something you want to do, you can go research and find companies and people working there and learn about it. And you can figure out how can you adapt to that. So that's the second step. Then I say, tell great stories. We're bad about listing details. Hey, Dave, what do you do? Oh, well, I'm a PhD physicist. I worked in laser spectroscopy. I did a test of special relativity. Okay, fine. But, is there a better way to describe what you've done and how that adapts to how that fits into what the company wants? Tell stories. That makes them, that helps them see, instead of you as the stereotypical overqualified PhD, that's how you communicate to them. Oh, okay, you are ready to come in here and do things because you've already done some things. You helped me see how you could do that. Build your network is the fourth step. It's all about other people. Online job searches are really not the way to get a good job. Talk to people. That's how you find out where the jobs are, what they need, and how you can fit. And then the final one is more of an inspirational step than an actionable thing. Think big. As scientists, we tend to get a lot of input on what scientists can do, and a lot of that is that traditional path to be a professor. There's actually a lot of things we can do, and when I look back at what I imagined my career to be when I was a graduate student, I had a very limited view because I really didn't know what was out there. Now that I've worked at different companies in a lot of different roles, some of them customer facing, learning about business and business development. I started my own company. I traveled around the world with that. I had no idea that all these things were actually something that a scientist could do. So I like to give them some inspiration. Think big. Think if there's something you think you might want to do, go after it. There's no reason, if somebody says, oh, I don't know, a PhD in biology, do you think you can really do that? Hey, maybe so. If you think your strengths fit and you're interested and motivated, go after it. Don't let other people's fears and doubts control what you can actually do. Then maybe they're just thinking, well, I wish I'd done that and I didn't. I would be disappointed if someone else had a rewarding career path that I wanted to take and was too scared to, so it's that's part of the risk, right? Think big, take a risk and give it a try, because I've had some of those great changes, where I took a risk in my career, really, really pan out and end up with something so much more rewarding than what I was doing even before. And so I encourage others to do it. So that's the system I think of, those 5 steps.
Nice. One other question that I was just thinking of when you were talking, Dave, is let's just say that you're a PhD student, but then you realize during your PhD studies that staying on in academia isn't something you want to do, and you do want to go into industry. Do you finish the degree or do you go into industry?
Well, so I don't think there's a right answer to that. I'll go back to it's a game, not a formula. I think it depends a lot on how you want to play that forward. Now, PhD certainly has value in the private sector, and completing that degree, if you really want to be a technical expert, that probably makes some sense. But there are plenty of people that decide, I don't really want to spend this much time on the technical details, on learning the science or learning something. I'd like to get out there and actually learn how the game is played. And some of them decide, I'm just going to get a master's and go out there. People are very successful. I've known many, actually. That sometimes is almost a sweet spot where they get enough schooling that they have shown, hey, I've specialized. I have more initiative than maybe the average person. But I don't want to spend this long in school. I want to get out and learn how business works and learn how the private sector works. And they can do very well. It's all a matter of what they decide their strengths and their target are going to be. So, if you're really not happy completing that degree, if you really don't think it fits what you want to do for a job, by all means, step out and go do something else. You can tell stories. Here's where the stories fit. You can help them see it the way you see it. Some people worry, if my resume, if my CV shows that I left my PhD program, people will decide that maybe I can't finish things. Well, don't let them decide that. If you have a good reason for it, you said, hey, I got in there, I saw what I was looking at, I changed my mind, and I decided I wanted to be productive in this way. Tell that story to people and help them see it the way you see it. Don't imagine that they're just going to make a conclusion. Connect the dots for them. And that's how you craft your own career that fits. That's far better than staying just to finish the degree, just so people don't doubt you. Make it yours.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Dave, this has been great talking to you again. Thank you again for being a return guest. How can people get in touch with you?
So my website, TurningScience.com, is the best way. I've got a contact form on that in a couple of the pages. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, David Giltner. I'm easy to find. I also have a YouTube channel. So if you search Turning Science on YouTube, I have a wide variety of videos about primarily private sector careers and issues around that. And then finally, it'd be great if everybody picks up a copy of my book here, Turn It the Right Way. It's a game, not a formula. Available on Amazon.
Excellent. Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. It's a platform for science and engineering professionals. I have a list of tips that you could potentially use to improve your presentation skills. You can pick that up at teachthegeek.com/tips. Again, that's teachthegeek.com/tips. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Neil. Take care.